I've always been fascinated by the strange, dark, and mysterious, by places that are shrouded in so many secrets and riddles that our minds have no choice but to fill the void with crazy or fascinating theories. So today, we're going to be looking into just that, into some of the most disturbing, intriguing, and mysterious places in video games of all time. Because if you're like me, while fun gameplay and characters are cool, they pale in comparison to worlds worth getting lost in. It's the main reason I personally love playing games, for that escape and the fire they light in our souls to know what's out there. Subnautica is a series practically made for discovery, and as such is no stranger to terrifying and mysterious locations, home to giant monsters, horrifying sounds, or the fear of the unknown. It's part of what makes a game so amazing in the first place, and why those with thalassophobia should steer clear. But while there are countless creepy and unexplainable places like the Void, Crater's Edge, the Blood-Kelp Forest, or even the rumored unidentified zone hidden behind claustrophobia-inducing tunnels of pure darkness in the lava zone, there actually is one place even more mysterious than all of this, which, while not quite as scary, is home to some of the craziest and most mind-blowing conundrums in the entire series, the Lost River. And that's because the Lost River is home to a myriad of life, some much more old than others, and many of which may hold the keys to the ancient past of this underwater planet. With 3 distinct ways of getting into this zone, it's almost impossible you miss it at some point during your playthrough, and the entire zone itself is characterized by foreboding and distinct caverns shrouded in darkness, only illuminated by the thick green glow of a poisonous must blanketing the ground everywhere you look. And when compared to other places underwater in Subnautica, the Lost River is quite barren with almost no living life, and the few things that do reside in these depths seem to already be dying, dead, or reaching out for help. But still, in a weird way, almost forming a beauty of its own, with striking and surprising rich color illuminations that stand out when compared to the rest of the game. And as if it couldn't get any more strange, the zone is one of the coldest in the entire game, meaning survival conditions down here are grueling, making traversal all the more difficult. However, if you do manage to make your way deeper into the biome, you are met with sprawling caverns full of peculiar rock formations jutting from the ceilings like stalactites that almost give off the sense that they were purpose-built for something. But as to what that something would be, it's hard to say. We do know that towards the center of the zone we can discover an abandoned disease research facility along with some accompanying analysis structures nearby, and inside these alien fortifications are the logs that detail how the facility was attacked by a massive sea leviathan, which broke the containment of the Carabacterium that was being studied, resulting in the entire ecosystem of the planet being sent into ruin, the main plot of the first game. We can even find the sea leviathan skeleton nearby lurking in the dark, but even more interestingly are the other skeletons we find too. For example, nearby one of the research centers is a wholly unique bone plate leviathan body, which almost looks like a giant slug that would have slithered on the ground, but seemingly has been dead for quite some time. Obviously, the researchers in this area must have been quite interested in what this creature was and what purpose it served, as nowadays there's nothing like it at all. And it makes you start to wonder, what exactly is the Lost River anyways? We know that Kara was first released here and likely resulted in the diseased look of the zone, along with the lack of notable life outside of ghost leviathans hunting us in the dark. But what was this place before? Well, the further you make your way into the interior of this dying place, the more insane the discoveries become, and the more questions they beg of us to ask. At one point you might stumble into the Tree Cove, a massive cavern with a hulking alien tree-like structure in the middle, surrounded by ghost rays swimming around it in an almost religious endeavor, like they are praying to some greater being. And even more horrifying, in the center of the zone's crossroads lies the biggest mystery in all of Subnautica, the gargantuan super leviathans. You see, scattered all across the poisonous and murky must at the bottom of the Lost River's innards are massive skeletal monstrosities that span entire rooms. Ancient skulls of creatures whose heads rival the size of the Cyclops, a massive submarine vehicle you can build in-game, and the biggest traversal machine you're able to build in the series so far. On its own, these skeletons are terrifying and imply the existence, or at least the past existence, of creatures that would dwarf even the largest Leviathan-class organisms we meet in-game. And considering how dangerous and anxiety-inducing these monsters already are, it really makes your imagination go wild with possibilities. For instance, while the Lost River is a relatively large zone with some big caverns, they most certainly aren't big enough to house creatures of this magnitude such as the gargantuan super Leviathan skeletons would imply, especially considering that by some accounts, most of the bodies are still hidden under the poisonous sands, which we can't even get to. So how on earth would such hulking beasts get into a cramped cavern like this? Well, considering the Lost River's proximity to the inactive lava zone just below, maybe at some point in the past, the Lost River was actually much more expansive, akin to the void area with thousands of miles of open ocean that seem to carry on into the depths of hell. Potentially at some point in the past, the lava zone became active, causing mass extinction events of the bigger predators and completely disfiguring and forming the landscape around the volcanic activity, resulting in the formation of the Lost River around dying super megafauna that were picked apart by smaller creatures later all the way to the bone. It's a fascinating idea in general and really shows the best parts of Subnautica, those places that give us more questions and answers with just enough environmental storytelling mixed in with some lore and data entries that imply truly fantastical ideas of what this planet must have been like in the past, and also things that could be in store for us in future iterations of the series. And more than anything, I think it's a perfect example of why mysterious places and games are so important, because even long after we have finished some of our favorite titles, the things we talk about and think about endlessly are those places or locations we saw that are so unexplainable that we can't help but speculate. It's one of my favorite parts about the games I love, and we have a ton more to discuss that are just as, if not even more insane. In a lot of ways, it feels like mystery and horror are a match made in heaven. Oftentimes, games with super mysterious themes happen to be scary, and almost always with anything that includes fear or panic, there are bound to be countless theories about the true nature of it all. And in terms of games that execute on this formula well, no one has done it better than Vampire the Masquerade Bloodelines and its infamous location, Ocean House Hotel. Back during the dusk of the 1950s in the Masquerade Bloodlines universe, a grand opening to a new mansion known as the Ocean House Hotel was about to take place. And due to all the excitement, a man named Ed and his loving family booked an extended vacation in order to be some of the first people who got to stay at this illustrious and decadent palace. However, what was supposed to be a fun family romp would turn into one of the most disturbing and mind-bending vacations of a lifetime. Near the beginning of the trip, Ed's wife began to notice him acting strange, garnering a special fascination with her locket which she had recently obtained from her mother. And day after day, Ed only started to act more unusual. He became extremely distant to his wife and kids, barely speaking or acknowledging their presence, and on the final day of the trip, Ed suddenly vanished. In a fit of hysteria, Ed's wife began to cry and plead, and while she did, their son, Ed Jr., began scouring all over their new hotel for his father. But after hours of searching to no avail, Jr. finally decided to search the locked basement, which was home to all sorts of creepy symbols and figurines, along with patches of darkness that seemed to reach into the hells themselves. And almost as soon as Jr. entered the basement, he too disappeared without a trace. Now even more distraught, Ed's wife instructed their daughter, Tiffany, to look for Jr. But before she could meet the same fate, a knock at the door came, and when they opened it, they found Ed, covered in blood and gore, with a sadistic look locked across his bruised face. The screaming and shouting lasted for but a moment, and in Ed's wake, all that was left was a deserted hotel with horrors beneath its floorboards. When we arrive at the hotel as a player character in game, it has now become utterly haunted, enveloped by the presence of evil spirits and ghosts that can send a shiver down the spine of even the most ruthless killers of the night, vampires, which we play as in game. And only by uncovering diary entries and old newspaper articles can we slowly unravel the mystery of what happened to this poor family, who was butchered by the father they trusted and the man they loved. In the laundry room, for example, in one of the machines can be found Junior's decapitated head, displayed as a trophy of sorts for those that wander close, and simply laid out in the hallway for all to see, a chopped up and minced torso of an innocent girl, Tiffany. At the time, Ed believed that his wife had gotten the locket from another man she was cheating with, but he was mistaken, as it was from her adoring mother who wept in their absence. But for as wild as the tale is, the story of the Ocean House Hotel doesn't stop there, because there are multiple reports of other strange things happening at this location. Rumors that the ground upon which it was built is cursed, and of course, the questions of how an otherwise normal man was driven to such insanity once he was in the confines of the hotel's walls. Certainly, there is more going on here than just a disgruntled marriage, as is made clear by simply stalking the halls of this place at night, where strange noises can be heard in rooms that were empty before, shadows appear that make no sense, or lamps that turn off and on as ominous voices whisper in our ear. And when you combine that with the labyrinthine layout that almost seems purposely built to confuse and bewilder those that stay, it's no wonder this level is so infamous for how creepy it really makes you feel. Behind every dark corner or in every room is a story that comes to life through nothing more than the way it makes you feel. There's almost no other place in a game with quite the same atmosphere that immediately is striking and terrifying, especially the more you dig into the location's past about a man that tortured his own family and other secrets which we never get to fully learn about. Without a doubt, Ocean House Hotel is not only one of the most mysterious and creepy places in gaming history, but also just one of the best, full stop. Made up of breathtaking atmosphere, environmental storytelling, and a keen attention to detail that really makes the environment shine, even all these years later. While it's taken me some time to finally come around to it, the lore and world of the Dragon Age series is some of the best out there, and might just be my favorite fantasy universe of all time, especially after playing Dragon Age Origins for the first time recently. And one of the reasons for this is that the Dragon Age universe is absolutely filled to the brim with awe-inspiring mysteries and unanswered questions that make you just sit down and read hours of entries in the wiki about its creation. Things like the Fade and Black City, the ancient elven ruins of Arlathon, or unexplored yet significant places like Parvolin to the north, or whatever lies across the Amaranthine Ocean. But in a sea of such rich places full of interesting questions, maybe none pose more of a grand mystery than the one sitting right below us the entire time, the Deep Roads. Thousands of years ago, the dwarves of Dragon Age, situated in Thedas, began construction on a massive network of superhighways and roads that connected many large and smaller settlements alike deep underground called taigs. These taigs were home to sprawling dwarven riches, places to sleep, and houses of parliament that all facilitated a colossal trading empire that saw the dwarves rise to their golden age by connecting with the Tevinter Imperium and ancient elven societies. But as with all great things, the empire had to eventually come to an end, and in the case of the dwarves, this was due to the initial rise of the Darkspawn, hidden deep beneath Thedas' crust, which they sprang from into the Deep Roads, attacking and killing anything they saw. This eventually, after years of battle, resulted in almost all of the taigs succumbing to death at the hands of the Darkspawn, while others were put under full lockdown, blocking off nearby Deep Road passageways so that no one could get in or out. Because while there was turmoil above ground in Thedas for all of this time, nothing would compare to the catastrophic fall of the dwarves, where what previously had been an underground civilization that spanned even more than the entire known space of the Dragon Age games became nothing more than a couple remaining taigs hidden deep underground. And due to this fall, in recent history, there's been a handful of what are called blights, where the Darkspawn, now hidden in the lost parts of the Deep Roads and even further underground, discover dormant old god dragons that, when awoken, lead the fearsome hordes above ground to try and take over all of Thedas. Or in other words, over the past couple thousands of years, the Deep Roads have become one of the most horrific and tragic stories in all of Dragon Age. What before was a grand empire of epic proportions now lies in ruins, with devilish creatures even outside of the Darkspawn themselves calling it home, and countless secrets lost to the passage of time. For example, we at multiple points during the games come into contact with or hear about what are called broodmothers, which are dreadful and horrendous globs of human flesh and appendages with tentacles leaking from every orifice, who are crafted after kidnapping helpless women who are tortured and condensed into birthing machines of pure death and decay. And this is just one instance of how dark, disgusting, yet strangely fascinating the lore in the Deep Roads can get, full of secrets as to what even lurks in the shadows of the ancient ancient ruins at this planet's core. And speaking of secrets, it's these questions that the Deep Road poses and the mysteries it alludes to that make it by far the most interesting part of Dragon Age, in my opinion, a series that already is full of amazing things to talk about. Because you see, the fall of the great dwarven empires didn't just mean the fall of the dwarves, it also meant the loss of so many tombs of information and history that otherwise would give us a much needed background on the lore of the series. In the Dragon Age Inquisition Descent DLC, for example, we discover that even deeper below the Deep Roads, there are entire civilizations of beings that don never before seen armors, and massive creatures known as Titans that could literally be the key to decade-long secrets like who the old gods are and what the fabled ancient Evanuris elven pantheon was up to so many years ago. Could it be that the Titans themselves once held the power to fight against the ancient elves, maybe even being the actual forgotten or forbidden ones that the Evanuris were said to have been at war with? Regardless, it's mysteries like this that make the Deep Roads so interesting, and even just the idea of such a metropolis being built underground is fascinating in its own right. It makes you wonder about what the height of the dwarves would have really been like, what secrets they were hiding beneath the ground from everyone else, and also questions of where things like Elysium, found underground and mined by dwarves who are resistant, even originally stem from. And for me, it's without a doubt one of the most mysterious places in any game series I've ever seen. So much so that even titles like Dragon Age Origins, where they have extensive slogs through the Deep Roads with boring fights and mundane color tones, the lore and curiosities on offer are so exciting that they still become some of my favorite moments. If you haven't played Dragon Age yet or don't understand why it has such a diehard fan base, look into even just surface level lore and knowledge on the Deep Roads and you will instantly understand exactly what it is that makes this series so special. One of the best parts about having a YouTube channel, in my opinion, is getting the opportunity to talk about lesser known games or ideas that never got the love or recognition they deserved. And in terms of games like this, maybe one of the most memorable for me is Torment Tides of Numenera. Because while I would never recommend anyone actually play this game, on account of the horrible combat, animations, and user interface, for those that can stomach these downsides, at the heart of the experience is a universe filled to the brim with unbelievable and fascinating places to discover, some of which are so unique and horrifying that it would be criminal not to include them in this video. However, out of all of these fascinating places, none reach the absolutely dizzying heights of the terror and fever dream that is the Bloom. Situated towards the end of the game in its final acts, the Bloom itself is actually an enormous and predatory living creature that lives between dimensions and space-time, with one of its most recognizable breeding grounds being beneath the capital city of Saga's Cliffs, where you start the game. You see, in the world of Torment Tides of Numenera, we actually play on a planet known as the Ninth World, an Earth a billion years into the future that has seen the rise and fall of 9 great civilizations that have all mysteriously disappeared. And with each passing of a civilization, great artifacts and pieces of technology were left behind on the planet known as Numenera, meaning the current age of humanity, which is now stuck in a hybrid of medieval and retro sci-fi, launches massive archaeological digs to uncover technologies to help push us forward. It's a fascinating concept in its own right, and lends the narrative of the game to tackle countless cool and unique sci-fi ideas, with the Bloom itself being one of the most prominent. The creature of sorts, which was likely created by one of the long-lost hyper-advanced civilizations, is able to open up what are called maws in different places across multiple dimensions, and with these massive gaping holes filled with razor-sharp teeth, can suck in unsuspecting or helpless individuals into its inner core. Deep inside, an entire civilization of people within the Bloom creature have set up towns and trading posts, leading to lots of gang warfare and infighting, all watched over by one ruling elite member called the Memovira. Slave trade is rampant, killing is commonplace, and the Bloom itself is known to tempt those inside with the promise of riches and great fortune if they only search deep within the unknown caverns of the guts of this monster. But when they do, the Bloom will swallow them whole and pull them through its gooey and sticky flesh towards a hell that we could never even imagine. Everywhere you look is nothing but flesh and blood, with a constant smell of bile and indigestion. And no matter where you go, you can find hundreds of strange artifacts, or long-lost ships from our dimension, or even others that were swallowed by massive maws reaching through space and time to bring life to the bloom. This also means by traversing the innards of this legendary beast, you can even find maws that will lead to new dimensions and places in time that only add to the elusive nature and powers of this monster that all these people call home. And really, it's without a doubt one of the most mysterious, unique, and downright awesome locations I've ever seen in a video game. Because even with all the out there and wacky ideas that are presented in Torment Tides of Numenera, like cannibals who eat human flesh in order to retain memories of the past, or a police force made up of siphoned years of life from criminals or citizens into robotic constructs, nothing beats the pure adrenaline rush the bloom gives you when you find it for the first time. It's a place defined by brutality and gore, where every step you take inside this living, breathing thing is horrifying and unnerving, especially considering the bloom is actively antagonistic to its guests with goals that we'll never truly know. And because of the creature's ability to cross dimensions so easily, it also almost acts like a bee spreading pollen, allowing adventurers to cross great distances in time or space and new technologies and peoples and cultures to cross paths that they never otherwise would have. And it really makes you wonder about the origins of this grand beast and the things that must lie deeper within its insides and unexplored passageways, which could lead to some of the greatest discoveries of those past civilizations that we've never seen. Or in other words, the bloom is the perfect example of why mysterious places and games are so important, because they give rise to these fascinating questions about the world and its lore, which makes playing any game so much better. So for anyone that's ever been curious why I love this game, even though I absolutely hate playing it, it's because of amazing world building and lore like this found in some of the most mysterious and perplexing places out there. Remedy Entertainment is no strangers to mind-bending places and scenarios across a multitude of different titles varying from Alan Wake all the way to Max Payne. But out of all of these series that they've worked on now, for me, none quite capture the magic of Control. In the first game, you play as Jessie Farden, a recently chosen director of the Federal Bureau of Control, or FBC, who finds herself trapped inside a fever dream of sorts where she must traverse through the headquarters of the clandestine US government agency, which is looking into top secret altered world events, or AWEs, which are classified as paranormal events that can affect time, space, and consciousness itself. The headquarters, known as the Oldest House, is a brutalist-style skyscraper in the center of New York City that can only be found by those that are meant to find it, otherwise being hidden by some unknown force or alternate dimension that is completely unexplainable. When you first make your way inside, you are met with an empty and ominous reception area, which is characterized by large and foreboding walls, stripped of any color and flavor, along with a whole host of government paraphernalia. But as you make your way deeper inside this now abandoned building, it becomes clear that things are about to get absolutely insane. What should just be one building in New York City somehow defies space itself, with corridors that go on for miles and an ever-changing and twisting labyrinth that one moment will throw you into an ordinary room and the next an otherworldly tapestry. Somehow, beyond reason, the inside of this structure is larger than the outside, going against the laws of physics itself. And all throughout your travels inside, you start to encounter what are known as the Hiss, a paranatural interdimensional resonance that is as aggressive as it is vitriolic, destroying most of the life inside the walls of this top secret government facility and using many human bodies as hosts to spread its infection and influence. Those possessed by the Hiss signal endlessly repeat a strange incantation, a poem of ambiguous origins and meaning, but one that is clearly ominous in nature. And the deeper you crawl inside this fortress of sorts, the stranger and stranger it gets. Because you see, the Oldest House is a place of power. It holds a paranatural connection to alternate dimensions, and comes into direct contact with the astral plane, another dimension in existence where a strange host of characters known as the Board sit and instruct you during your playtime. The walls around you will twist and contort with every step you take, and in certain moments you will be thrust into different locations entirely, like a small and barren motel with a constantly ringing telephone and anxiety-inducing sounds all around you. Most famously of all though, there's one room in this space, known as the Astral Maze, which once entered will spring into action, flipping ceilings onto the floor and floors onto the ceiling, and literally changing the makeup of the building before your very eyes, forcing you into rooms with hundreds of doors, no way out, and no hope. Almost like being trapped within a maze in your own mind. Or in other words, the oldest house is less of a building and more of a character of its own, a creature that has a heartbeat and a lust for torture and confusion, that lets you rip apart its very skin to demolish enemies with, and is home to countless secrets and mysteries everywhere. And when you combine this with Soviet-era style aesthetics and themes of secretive government organizations with strict adherence to protocol and a noticeable delineation of responsibilities, making it so no one person quite knows exactly what is going on, this entire place gives off a relentlessly eerie feeling that is unshakable. So the question then becomes, what exactly is the oldest house? We know that for 50 years after its initial completion, the FBC did operate out of it as their main headquarters, and that extensive research was done into countless AWEs, which we can find notes about scattered in the abandoned work and research rooms. At its peak, the facility likely would have been home to hundreds of employees as well, potentially being one of the highest funded government programs in history and diving into research in fields that were being created by the day, projects that might have been the most important in human history. And we also know that the Hiss attacked the oldest house at some point after being let free, and consumed the essence of the project entirely. But this still leaves so much room for speculation and conjecture as to what is really going on here. For instance, could it be that the oldest house is some sort of analogy to Yggdrasil, an ancient tree in Norse mythology that bridges the 9 worlds by its roots and branches? After all, at one point in Control, we meet a man named Adi who asks us to follow him to the Foundation, a series of infinite pillars that the oldest house is built on, with a mention of doorways that can be used to travel to new worlds. Maybe the oldest house is the center of the universe, a single point in time and space which forms all dimensions and reality into one, where doors lead not into other rooms, but new forms of existence itself. And if so, is there a more grand mind or creator behind all of this? Or how did this place of power that is so central to the story of not only Control, but the now entire Remedy connected universe come to be? Well, considering that Control 2 is currently in development, we may just get the answers to some of these questions that we're looking for. But due to the truly mysterious nature of what happens inside the walls of this skyscraper traveling through time and space, there will always be more questions than answers as to what's really going on here. And in a way, that's part of what makes the oldest house, and Control by extension, one of the most fascinating universes and worlds to get lost in, where behind every corner, every door, and each elevator could be a portal into a new type of existence entirely. For any of you who have watched my channel for a while now, you know that outside of Subnautica, I'm not a huge fan of survival games. I find most of them boring and tedious without friends, and oftentimes I hit a point where I begin to question why I'm even spending my time playing. But if there's one thing that can make me forget about all the tedium of collecting wood and building makeshift shacks, it's a grand mystery that is so fascinating you can't help but dig into it further. And in terms of survival games with something like this, potentially none are more jaw-dropping than the big reveal from the forest, which starts out like any other unassuming survival game, but slowly unravels into pure psychological horror and the discovery of one of the most mysterious places in games. After crash landing mid-plane flight in a remote peninsula off the coast of Canada and watching your son be kidnapped from a man covered in what looks like blood, it becomes your sole goal to not only survive, but get your son back. And after spending a couple of nights in this haunted wilderness, it becomes apparent that while you're the only person you know of who survived the plane crash, you certainly are not even close to the only person here. In the dead of night, you will be hunted down by strange tribesmen and feral humans which grunt and scream at you, attacking your housing as they slowly become more and more confident in getting closer for full-on engagements. It creates a very unnerving sense of tension the entire time you play, and makes searching for what happened to your son that much more agonizing. But the true genius of the forest isn't just the tense world building, but rather the insane place it eventually leads you to. Because in your adventure adventure to find your son, you start to slowly peel back some of the history of this demented peninsula, discovering that many years ago a group of Christian mercenaries came to found new colonies, but after making landfall discovered that there was a lot more than meets the eye. Powerful devices known as resurrection obelisks were uncovered which would grant the missionaries astounding otherworldly gifts or riches in return for child sacrifice. And because of this, they slowly transformed into fanatics and sadistic killers in order to get their way and maintain power. The obelisk would transform the now dead children into horrible monstrosities which looked like a stomach-turning mush of human matter with faces that screamed and begged for help, hobbling around on multiple legs. Eventually, this led to stories of this supposedly haunted place, which attracted many adventurers who went missing, especially those with children. And all of this commotion eventually led to a highly funded team known as the Sahara Therapeutics Research Group founding a foothold in the region, after which they gained complete control of the obelisk and other top secret artifacts, of which massive facilities were built around to study their properties. One of the main scientists at the time had a daughter who was dying, and in order to try and save her, the teams would sacrifice dozens or potentially even hundreds of children in the device in order to study what would happen, with many early test subjects becoming Cthulhian-like monsters which would become angry and fight back, while other children would become very sick with violent seizures. But after running out of their initial batch of children captive lab rats, the team decided to use another Ancient One's artifact found which could be fired as a pulse weapon, which took down the plane you were riding at the start of the game, and the reason your son was kidnapped was for the use in the experiments. So towards the end of the game, you eventually find your son dead and the main researcher's daughter alive, now transforming into a massive meat zombie, after which the main protagonist decides his only way to save his son is to once again down another plane for more children experimentation. It's a horribly tragic story, and one that only gets more crazy in the sequel, where we can discover an Ancient One's golden cube which can travel between dimensions and create wormholes. But really, at the core of all of this is the Sahara Research Labs. These pristine yet harrowing research facilities spread across the island are in stark contrast to the rugged wilderness outside, and often are built around large alien buildings or artifacts that are being studied. Even walking through the red and white hallways of these massive research stations is daunting, and imply that there must have been countless scientists here doing some of the most heinous things imaginable. And really, it just opens up countless mysteries as to how this amount of horror could ever happen. After all, we know in our real lives that things like Unit 731 from Japan show that this can actually happen, but the Ancient One's obelisk at the center of it all also call into question what these things even are. Who exactly were the Ancient Ones who left behind so many things on this peninsula, presumably thousands of years ago? What did the Christian mercenaries first see in their visions when they arrived at the island that caused them to turn like they did? And what even is the purpose of the child sacrifices in this place that create beings that look straight out of a nightmare? While we do get a lot of answers and discoveries across multiple games now, we still have so many things to uncover about what happened inside the walls of Sahara Therapeutics Research Group, as well as how all this alien tech works, what its purpose is, and where it comes from. Some in the community have even speculated that it could be a top secret government cover-up with the end goal of multi-dimensional space travel. Regardless though, the research being done behind the walls of Sahara Therapeutics in this remote forest is some of the most mysterious out there, and it makes the forest a game with countless places that send a shiver down your spine while being so captivating you can never look away. If you're looking for mysterious settings with complex and haunting lore or world building, there's maybe no better place to look than From Software games. Creators of Elden Ring, Bloodborne, Dark Souls, and Sekiro, their worlds are practically made to hide dark and foreboding secrets. But maybe no zone, in my opinion, leaves more of an impact than one of their very first, a location that gave birth to many more down the line in FromSoft's now storied lineage. And that place is Ash Lake from Dark Souls 1. Located beneath the Great Hollow, a foreboding and massive tree that you see throughout the game, Ash Lake is one of the most amazing discoveries you come across in the entire series. First of all, to get there, you must traverse a poisonous swamp near Blighttown, and around all of the edges are multiple invisible illusionary walls that, if bypassed, lead into the core of this grand tree. You see, many years ago, before the First Flame, which kicked off disparity in the world, forging life and death, light and dark, and the Lovecraftian creatures fans have grown to love, the world of Dark Souls was a much different place. It was an entirely barren and arid world comprised of nothing but depressing and boring grays. And in this era, known as the Age of the Ancients, the planet was covered in nothing but fog, gray and stinted rocks, and the great and everlasting dragons. But there was one more thing at this time that dotted the landscapes, and that was the arch trees. These massive structures were made of stone, half living and half mineral, with no consciousness, that simply existed in the eons of time. But after the first flame and wars that followed, the trees started to take on even more of a life of their own. And for miles and miles all across the world, these hulking beasts stood tall and foreboding, as a symbol of not only power, but mystery. In Dark Souls 1, if you managed to make your way into the Great Hollow, one of these ancient arch trees, you were met with a maze-like labyrinth of never-ending vines, stumps, and horrors of the history inside. And if you manage to somehow make your way further and further down, you eventually are able to make it to a place even more bewildering than the tree itself, and finally come into contact with Ash Lake. Deep beneath this tree is an entire world unlike anything else you've seen in the game up to this point. An underground wasteland that stretches on for thousands of miles, with a thick and ominous set of fog and clouds that blanket the sky of this underground cavern, and millions of other arch trees sitting in slumber, stretching far across the underground cloudscape and into the world above. In every direction is nothing but sand and dark blue water, or branches that rival the beauty of the wonders of the world. It's an absolutely stunning place to find for the first time, and considering so many people can miss it since you have to go through multiple hidden doors and down an entire skyscraper-sized tree, it makes it all that more special. But the truly crazy part about Ash Lake is just how much we don't know about it too. For example, while we can see many other arch trees far off into the distance, the actual explorable area of the zone doesn't allow us to fully engage with any of them, instead keeping us restrained to our little beach area with a dragon to fight and 2 bonfires to discover. In a way, it makes you as the player feel small, insignificant even, because of all of the things you now know exist out there but are unable to reach. And even more crazy is the idea that these trees may not be leading to other places on the planet, but other universes and dimensions entirely. Some in the community, based on specific item entries and small hints, have even begun to speculate that Ash Lake may actually be more than just a hidden zone under the arch trees, but rather the center of the universe itself, where every tree you see is actually a new timeline, a new place, or an entirely new existence and dimension in itself. And the more you think about it, the crazier it gets, because even disregarding some of this wild speculation, how on earth did this zone come to be in the first place? Why are there massive beaches and what seems to be an entire ocean so deep underground? Why are there clouds and fogs in the sky of these caverns? And what sorts of secrets about the storied past of this world and the Age of the Ancients can we uncover by searching through Ash Lake? It really is just one of those zones where you simply stop for a second the first time you find it and sit in awe at what's in front of you. And the deeper you look into it, the more and more the implications become absolutely mind-blowing. And for me specifically, it's the perfect example of From Software lore and world building done right, where sometimes their storytelling methods and obscurity converge on the edge of being too obtuse and obfuscated just to seem cool. Ash Lake is a sort of genuinely exciting discovery that, because it's so hidden, really hits the mark when you finally find it. And even though we'll probably never find out all of the secrets of Ash Lake, it will forever live on in the minds and hearts of those who found it, like a bonfire whose light never dulls. First impressions for me are everything, and it's because of this I've struggled for years to try and get into Pillars of Eternity. I always thought the start of the first game was so slow and mundane, and because of that, mixed with combat that I absolutely loathed, I never was able to see the appeal. But luckily, after finally forcing myself to give the title another shot after multiple failed attempts, and going in with the mindset of taking the experience slow to enjoy, I finally have fallen in love. And the thing that actually made me come to adore the title and its sequel are the amazing quests with absolutely riveting and engaging stories that open up a whole host of unforgettable mysteries and questions. However, while the main quests, DLCs, and multiple side quests are full of fascinating places to dive into and analyze, maybe the most mysterious of all are the Endless Pass of Odd Nua. Located directly below the castle of Caed Nua, which we assume control of early on in the first game, the Endless Pass are a 15-level mega dungeon consisting of labyrinthian sets of tunnel networks, caverns, and secret passageways, all hidden beneath the Earth's crust, shrouding some of the biggest secrets in the entire series and becoming the home to countless creatures and beings alike. You see, many millennia ago, there was a hyper-advanced civilization of warriors and scientists known as the Inquithans. They controlled much of the known world that we play on in the Pillars games, but maybe their biggest achievement came from their mastery over the souls of the universe. In Pillars, every time someone or something dies, their soul is sent either to the in-between, disintegrated, or thrust into the wheel. This wheel is constantly spinning, contorting souls into new bodies of which they inhabit and live on, sometimes, like in the case of our protagonist the Watcher, even being awakened, meaning they are able to remember their past selves. So with mastery over this cycle of life, the Inquithans built massive contraptions to harness and use souls. But in the case of the Endless Paths, this process resulted in mass genocide and some of the craziest things imaginable. The king of Caed Nua at the time of the Inquithans was known as Ad Nua. He was a respectable and lovable king, but when his son died trying to honor him in battle, he dedicated his life to trying to get him back. He commissioned the smartest scientists and animancers to try and gain control over the wheel of time itself in order to bring his son back. But after years of trial and error, he finally had to start turning to soul sacrifice in order to achieve his goals. Deep beneath the keep of Caed Nua were massive Audra veins that pulled essence from the core of the world itself, and by sacrificing thousands of his own people, he was able to further study the methods to bring his only son back. Eventually, this led to uprisings and riots from his people, as thousands were cut down by inhuman Audra vessels that murdered on the command of this now evil tyrant Ad Nua. And well, this eventually led to the downfall of this entire group of Inquithans, where now deep underground only a couple survivors remain, retaining their life by killing one another and converting their souls into essence. So in the time of the first Pillars game, when we actually assume control of Caed Nua as the Watcher, we get a set of side quests to try and discover who the so-called master is below, the king of the Endless Paths. It's one of the coolest side quests and dungeons I've ever seen in a game, with each of the 15 levels you must traverse down being home to untold secrets, journal entries, and a deeper understanding of Inquithan society and cultures that for many is nothing but rumors and fables. And to top it all off, the further you go underground, the more strange creatures, both feral and sentient alike, you discover, all with their own societies and customs that have been formed so far away from polite civilization, along with crazy revelations they can help you uncover. You can find dens full of spiders that feast on the minds of their prey, ogres that are hiding from their past, ancient bug-like creatures that are cunning, or even massive dragons with the power to take on the gods themselves. And as if it couldn't get any more interesting, the things you uncover here about the Inquithans and their society, about the history of this planet, tie in directly to the main story as well, and provide more context for some of the things you uncover later at the very end of the main story, and even some of the main plot of the second game as well. Or in other words, the Endless Paths are an utterly captivating place within the Pillars of Eternity universe. A mega dungeon that will take hours and hours to finally beat, full of puzzles, riddles, and monsters that all peel the layers back as to what actually went on in these great walls so many years ago. And it makes you start to wonder more and more about how these paths were even formed, and what the ancient peoples of the time must have gone through to construct everything you find. Or even, what else is out there in the cavernous wastes of the underground in the Pillars of Eternity universe, home to so much lost technology and Audra veins that can be used to power some of the greatest achievements civilization has ever known. And despite all that we do learn about the endless paths of Ad Nua, there is still so much we don't know too. So many passageways we cannot go through, so many gaping maws that lead to something greater, and the constant feeling that we are being watched by something greater than ourselves, almost like a sign from the universe itself. And considering the main themes of this series and the existence of God and the meaning behind it all, it fits in perfectly. I'm such a sucker for ancient long-lost civilization stories and uncovering the past almost like an archaeologist, where you are always left with more questions and answers. And in terms of places like this, the Pillars universe, and especially the Endless Paths, are about as good as it gets. The continent. otherwise known as a place that most of the Witcher games and books take place on, is one of the most lore-filled and fascinating fictitious worlds ever made. It's home to a host of horrifying creatures, both animal and human alike, along with hundreds of years of political intrigue and magical world-altering events. But maybe most interesting of all of these events is the catastrophe that kicked off the universe in the first place, the conjunction of the spheres. Taking place well over a millennia ago, the conjunction marked a point in time where multiple universes and dimensions collided into one another, resulting in aliens and monsters from different places across multiple galaxies and planets meshing and contorting into one another. Which, by the way, is why we find all the monsters we do in the games, books, and shows The Witcher is based on. However, maybe the coolest thing this actually resulted in is the ability for some people, like Ciri, to travel between time and space itself to alternate dimensions and places by using unicorn god magic, and yes, I'm not joking. But despite how many amazing locations there are in The Witcher 3 specifically, full of so much mystery and intrigue, it's one of the planets we visit through a portal to another universe due to the conjunction of the spheres that takes the cake. And by far the coolest mission in the game, through time and space, an elf named Avallac'h manages to open up multiple portals that allow Geralt to follow him on a journey across many worlds. This includes a snow-covered apocalyptic planet that has been taken by the White Frost, which swallows entire planets whole in a deep freeze, a massive desert oasis with bugs the size of school buses, and underwater elven ruins that hold the keys to the secrets of ancient and powerful lost civilizations. But the one that really caught my attention, and also led to the most interesting questions, is the breathtaking and toxic Forgotten Gas world. Because while we were only here for potentially minutes, this location stands out for a couple of reasons. First of all, the environment here seems to expand for a dizzying amount of miles in each direction, with wide open plains and massive rock formations that tower above you, providing shade against the beaming rays of sun. And on the ground everywhere you look are tall and foreboding blades of red grass, being swallowed by a thick and poisonous green mist that, if you stand in it for too long, will cut your journey short right near the end. Where things start to get especially strange, though, are the sounds we can hear. While the planet has an odd calmness and stillness to it, these momentary glimpses of peace are constantly broken up by the loud and ominous screeches and croaks bellowing from unseen monstrosities in the distance. If you stand in one place for too long, subtle hums and movement can be heard jostling in the ground beneath your feet, and throughout it all you can't help but shake the feeling that within this sea of red you are being watched, and that something is just off. Things only start to get even more crazy though when we look closer at the ground, because literally all around the landscape are what at first seemed like meaningless red blotches, but upon further inspection are revealed to be massive patches of algae. So what on earth is all of this algae doing on a planet this out in the open? And how did these rock formations even form naturally in the first place? It's almost like this planet is man-made or designed in some way. But the real answer might be even more interesting. If you comb through the environment some while on this planet, rather than quickly doing your quest and moving on, you may stumble upon gargantuan graveyards filled with strange skeletons and remains. These large and deceased creatures, though, are so notable not because of what they do have, but rather what they lack. No feet, no arms, and nothing that would indicate how these massive things even got around on this barren planet in the first place. But that's when it hits you. These creatures instead sport tails, fins, gills, and all manner of appendages suited for life deep underwater. So could it be that this grand and mysterious planet we have found ourselves on is actually previously a fully water-based planet? One that during the conjunction of the spheres was stripped of its most precious resource as universes and dimensions contorted themselves into one another, leaving in its wake a now barren and apocalyptic wasteland of pure mystery. In fact, in the base game of Witcher 3, deep within the woods of Velen, if you pay close attention, you can actually find what seems to be an exact replica of one of the massive sea creature skeletons we find on the toxic gas planet. And this likely means that at some point in the past, megafauna like whales rained from the sky on the continent and crashed into the oceans and lands, along with a sea of rain from the oceans. It's a startling thrilling revelation, but one that makes more sense the more you dive into this mystery, and especially when you take into account all of the strange things we encounter in each of the games. And considering that on this toxic gas planet we can actually find a place of power as well, implying a strong pull of magic in the area, could it be that the aquatic life on this rock millennia ago was actually intelligent and beginning to wield forces of great power? Overall, for all the interesting things this planet reveals to us about The Witcher, it still leaves us with so many fascinating mysteries to solve, like what those sounds off in the distance and deep beneath the planet's crust are, whether or not we can find the previous inhabitants still alive in the oceans of the mainland games on the continent, and just what this planet used to be. I really do hope that we get more mysteries like this in the upcoming Witcher games, because for me, it's what makes them the most fun to play. I've always been a sucker for extremely obscure and artistic style games that tell a story through nothing more than secrets and intrigue. And in terms of titles like this, few do it better than the small indie project from Playdead, Inside. At the very start of the game, you find yourself as a young boy trapped in a forest, donning pale white skin and no face. But as if things couldn't get any weirder, you very quickly start to get hunted down by ominous men in the forest, who train their dogs under your scent and have them run you down. The real insanity only happens a little bit after this though, when you make your way to a nearby farm where after sneaking into some of the buildings, you discover that an army of albinos, strange human-like creatures that look quite similar to you, are being marched through a conveyor belt of checks and testing. Something obviously sinister is going on in the remote parts of this forested region, and only by sneaking your way past all of the obstacles here do you finally start to uncover even more oddities. You find a submarine that takes you deep underwater where you find poltergeist-esque monstrosities that hunt you down and scream. And most horrifying of all, by the very end of the game, you finally make your way into some of the main research bays in this massive facility spanning miles, where you unearth and become what is known as the Huddle or Blob, a hulking mass of human flesh and organs that rolls around in a ball as limbs from helpless individuals flail around like a piñata being struck by a bat. It's by far one of the most memorable endings to a video game I have ever played, and truly puts into context how brutal the experiments going on in this facility must be. But you see, that's just the thing. We don't ever actually get any definitive answers as to what's going on here. Based on what we do know though, we can harbor a guess that it's some sort of mind control facility, with lots of robots and a handful of scientists monitoring experiments. For example, as you run from left to right during the entire game, you stumble upon multiple head devices that have the power to control the albino husks entirely, allowing you to connect yourself to one node in order to get other helpless individuals to do your bidding. On top of that, during some of the underwater sections, we can find what are called mind tanks, cylindrical chambers with a single window looking to the outside world, with long and twisting wires and tubes that extend high into unexplorable parts of the facility. Could it be that these foreboding contraptions are used to create the albinos we see all across the game world? Or maybe even something more violent like the swimming girls? And on that note, what even are the albinos? Potentially they could be human beings that have been kidnapped and experimented on, or maybe even a new type of being entirely made from the flesh of many slaughtered pigs that we find. At one point, we even get quick glances of albinos that are being strapped deep underwater as their bodies float up, confined to wires that hold them in place, leaving us with a haunting scene of pure tragedy. Something truly horrific and remarkable is happening in this secret facility, and along with this, surely an unimaginable amount of pain and suffering. To what ends are the scientists here working towards? What is the point of all the experiments we find? And if it is all for mind control, then what's the end goal? Maybe it's a government conspiracy, or a cult of sorts hidden in the dense woodlands of rural America. Either way, considering how expansive and sophisticated this facility is, the benefactors behind it are obviously well funded and in search of some sort of answers. And really, the facility in Inside is just another perfect example of how to do mystery in video games right, where not only do the questions themselves about the setting create a lot of intrigue, but also enable the ability for us to create a story in our own heads through nothing more than informed speculation. Sometimes not getting all of the answers is the best answer we could get, where everything we see is always shrouded in just enough wonder and awe. The Elder Scrolls as a series seems to have a particularly potent knack at casting a spell on players, and by that I mean an ability to transport us to entirely new worlds where we feel completely immersed and enveloped. If you look online at game theories and long-form analysis, a lot of the best performing videos in these categories are from Elder Scrolls and Fallout, and a big reason for that are the mysterious locations full of questions that add so much to the worlds and their character, while also giving the fan base an endless amount of things to speculate on. But out of all of the places in Elder Scrolls which spawn crusades like this, maybe none are more captivating than Hactor and the story of the Deep Ones. Found in the Elder Scrolls IV Oblivion, at one point in your journey you can stumble upon a distraught and worried Argonian mother in a popular inn, who exclaims that her young and innocent daughter Dharma has gone missing. This Dharma herself is actually a person you met earlier in game, but it's only after your first introductions and upon returning to the same city later that the infamous Shadow over Hactor quest kicks into gear. Her mother gives you the route that they walked before she went missing and begs you to help her out. And if you start to trace through that same route through the nearby densely populated woodlands, you eventually stumble upon a completely remote and hidden town known as Hactor. Immediately as you enter the town, citizens start to either hide in their houses or simply ignore you. And if you question anyone about the disappearance of Dharma, you are met with nothing but short answers and concerned expressions. The more people you start to ask, the more commotion begins to stew as well, where if you are sneaking around the buildings, you can even hear multiple people gossiping and whispering, asking exactly what you're doing here. Something extremely wrong is obviously going on in this town, but you can't quite put your finger on it yet. But with the citizens acting so creepily, and lots of buildings in the town donning burnt infrastructure or strange symbolism, it's clear that we will need to investigate what's going on further. At one point, you even discover that a specific patron in town has been following you for some time, and that no matter where you go, will be just a couple of steps behind you, watching your every move like a hawk stalking its prey. But just when you think you've exhausted all options, you may stumble upon one specific resident named Jiv Harel. Immediately, if you question him about Dharma, he will shush you and expediently explain that he cannot talk here, but that the young girl is in grave danger. If you follow him to a more remote location, he will explain that 80 years ago, the citizens of Hactor discovered a grave evil. Miners in the massive cave networks beneath the town unearthed a discovery that would change them forever. Strange and disturbing beings, they nicknamed the Deep Ones, roamed and stalked in the dark, with creaks and groans that echoed off the claustrophobic walls and sent shivers down the spines of any who heard them. But even more horrifying, some of the unlucky miners began to experience unexplainable ailments and symptoms, turning into what were called the Brethren, feral human constructs with distorted faces and bodies that would hiss and aggressively attack others. In a panic, the town began to worship these now hidden Deep Ones, and were told that in order to remain safe, they would need to make human sacrifices to their newly found gods. Meaning deep below your very feet, Dharma could very well be sitting in a prison cell, chained to the walls of a dark and damp cave, waiting to be devoured by things we don't even understand. And well, it's one of the darkest stories in all of Elder Scrolls, but also opens up so many mysteries as to the history of Hactor and what the Deep Ones even are. For example, in the church in town, if you sneak inside at night and open up a book on the sermon table, you are met with a barrage of Daedric symbols and iconography, strongly implying that the Deep Ones themselves may be Daedric princes that are forcing people to kill for their own amusement, most likely Lord Dagon or Molag Bal. But also, considering the actual name, Deep Ones, maybe it could be a reference to the Dwemer, who are also called the Deep Elves in many lore tombs. More interestingly though, some in the Elder Scrolls community have begun to speculate that the Deep Ones could be the race of sentient fat toad people called the Slode, which are known to create massive slave networks and work with Daedric princes. This theory specifically holds a lot of weight as well, because if all of the Daedric symbols in the book are translated into a more readable language, the contents exactly match the text we can find from a Slode writer in the Elder Scrolls offshoot game Redguard. However, regardless of what actually is going on with the Deep Ones, this small and remote town in the middle of the forest is such an intriguing mystery. After all, what happened to the burnt down buildings we can see? How many people have been kidnapped and sacrificed here? What truly is going on with the Brethren who have lost their minds deep underground? And what more do these people have to hide? Because the more you walk around Hactor and investigate its storied past, the more you realize there are so many more questions than there are answers. And even in a series with so many places like this, none quite leave the same lasting impression as as a shadow that looms over this quaint and beautiful town in the middle of a dark forest. I've mentioned it time and time again now in multiple videos I've made that Mass Effect 1 is not only the best Mass Effect game, but also one of my favorite sci-fi things of all time. And by far the biggest contributing factor to my love of where this franchise all began is actually the amazing level of world building and lore that this introduction so masterfully got the player base involved in. Because with any game with an engaging world, there's bound to be countless unanswered questions and mysteries that come along with that. The kind that simply let us wonder in awe at what the truth behind it all could be. And for Mass Effect 1 specifically, maybe no single planet or location is shrouded in a more intriguing mystery like this than the ancient ruins found on Ilos. As part of the finale of the game, Ilos itself isn't actually a place we get to explore all that long, but with the small time we do have, we uncover some of the coolest things in the whole series. First of all, to even get to this remote location, we have to discover the coordinates of the long-fabled and lost Mu Mass Effect relay, which allows faster-than-light travel to remote parts of the galaxy that have remained almost completely unexplored. When first docking on the planet, we are met with a grand view of a society covered in advanced technology and massive buildings, now all taken over by plant life and vegetation, after years of being dormant. It's clear that some sort of Armageddon must have occurred, but as to what this is, it's hard to say. And as you battle your way through enemy forces on the same planet trying to discover the same secrets you are, the awe of it all only grows. For miles and miles, you drive through facilities housing sleep pods and top-secret research, along with devices and structures that bear no resemblance to any human or alien species you've seen in the universe up to this point. And again, in every area, the planet's life itself has taken over, with twisting vines and large swaths of plant life implying that no one has stepped foot on here in a long, long time. But just as this new setting starts to reach its peak levels of curiosity, we get another breakthrough and come into contact with a previously dormant and damaged virtual intelligence agent that controls much of the facilities, known as Vigil. When speaking with this orange hologram, we are told that Ilos is actually a long-lost research planet for the Protheans, a species that used to rule the galaxy thousands of years ago. You see, in the Mass Effect lore, for anyone who doesn't know, the big reveal of the first game is that the Reapers, who were originally thought to only be the capital ship of the Geth, are actually a race of highly intelligent machine monsters that purge the galaxy of all sufficiently intelligent organic life every 50,000 years. This process is due to their original Prime Directive, after being created by the Leviathan aliens millions of years ago to protect life at all costs. The Reapers determine that in order to do this, they must cull the budding life in the Milky Way periodically in order to make sure they do not become so advanced they kill themselves, leaving only primitive intelligences like apes that predated humanity alive to flourish in the next cycle, waiting to be murdered. So the Protheans that built this virtual intelligence on Ilos, Vigil, were completely destroyed in the previous cycle, and left Vigil on in hopes that he could warn a future civilization of the impending danger and of potential ways to stop it. It's a really cool reveal just by itself, and without a doubt is one of the most hype moments in the whole series, but for most players after this, they will just charge headfirst back to the Citadel for the final fight in one of the most epic endings to a game of all time. The thing is though, Ilos actually has a lot more mystery than just this. Because while the Protheans did make a home here and built many new great things, Ilos actually began hundreds of thousands of years before that, with a completely unexplained race of hyper-intelligent organisms known as the Insuanan. At the time, this grand civilization, like the Protheans and other races we meet in the current timeline of Mass Effect, had conquered most of the galaxy. With the help of the Mass Effect and Citadel technology that the Reapers always leave behind to try and trick civilizations into their own doom. But the Insuanan were also said to be involved in a devastating war with another unknown species that we hear nothing about, which almost wiped them out completely. Ilos was one of the original planets that housed their capital cities, and it was said to have given birth to countless technological achievements that we can only dream of. But as in all cycles before it, the Insuanan were made completely extinct due to the Reapers, and so for countless cycles afterwards, new civilizations like the Protheans grew from their ashes, taking over now dormant facilities and learning from their ancestors, while building new things corresponding to their own civilization on top of these now dead cultures. Or in other words, in many ways, Ilos could be thought of as an eternal tomb. a place where now many great civilizations have come and gone, each being formed by the last, while also creating their new ideas on top as well. Beneath the ground are a millennia of history and technologies that have been forgotten to time, along with records of what these people were like, some of which were very similar to us, or some so different we wouldn't even recognize them. And it really all just adds to the mystery of this place. A planet that throughout history has served as either a central point of galactic politics and trade, all the way to being a forgotten and barren planet covered in dormant high technology buildings covered in moss. Maybe further study here will reveal some of the biggest questions still left unanswered in the Mass Effect series, or lead to even more fantastical things in the universe that we weren't even aware of before. But regardless, the planet and its origins, past and even present, are shrouded in so much mystery and intrigue that despite how short of a time we spend there, it's one of the places in the series I think back on most. The world of Disco Elysium is one that is steeped in political themes and philosophical strife, full of quests and scenarios that will make you think deeply about the human condition. And while for me, I vastly prefer experiences like Citizen Sleeper and its takeaways to those in Disco Elysium, if there's one thing about the game that I can never get off my mind, it's the bunker. You see, near the coastline in the western portion of Revishal's exterior, the city the game takes place in, you can find a peculiar abandoned bunker sitting with no one in sight. On first glance, this isn't very notable. After all, Revishal has a storied and bloodied past, with many bunkers dotting the landscape, most of which we get to explore and unearth secrets in. But this particular bunker is different. It has a door with one of the hardest skill checks in the game, almost impossible even, but even more crazy, if you do somehow succeed or hit a critical success with the roll of the dice, you still, despite defying all odds, are not allowed in. Presumably, the bunker is connected to the Grand Sea Fortress and was used as an inlet to the water canal, maybe for transporting supplies across the mainway in times of battle and war. But also, around the area can be heard strange noises and humming, along with a buzzing that illuminates itself in such a way to imply that something more sinister is going on. So what exactly is happening inside this inaccessible area? After all, nearby in the church, we can go on an extensive questline that sees us coming into contact with the paranormal and human beings that climb on walls like something out of a horror movie. So maybe they could all be connected. But the greatest part about this mystery is just that we don't know. Truly anything could lie inside this bunker, but considering where it is on the map and the strange circumstances that surround its past as well as its present, there's probably a lot more than meets the eye. And out of everything in Disco Elysium I want to know more about, this one takes the cake. Sadly though, in-game it serves as nothing more than a starting point for a thought known as One More Door, which if you contemplate on for over 45 minutes using your character upgrade screen, you will be met with this text. There's no way to open the supply depot door. Accept it. You cannot open all the doors. You have to integrate this into your character. Some doors will forever remain closed, even if every single other door will open at one time or another. Maybe to a key, or maybe to some sort of tool meant for opening doors. But this one will never accede to such commands. A realization crucial to personal growth. Crucial. While the greatest start to a game of all time is without a doubt Prey from Arcane Studios, followed closely by the original Prey title from 2006, another worthy contender has to be Half-Life 1. At the very start of the game, you open your eyes to find yourself on a high-speed tram taking you across a massive expanse of desert and concrete buildings. And as you look from side to side surrounded by pristine windows, you slowly make your way deeper into a top-secret base known as the Black Mesa Research Facility. You play as Gordon Freeman, a theoretical physicist and doctor who has been assigned to this remote government installation in the New Mexico high desert, and as your train comes to a halt at your station, it becomes clear that this base is hiding a lot more than meets the eye. You see, presumably at some point in the 50s, the United States government created Black Mesa atop the ashes of abandoned ICBM missile silos in an attempt to gain a foothold on the cutting edge of tech in order to give themselves an advantage over adversaries. Similar to Area 51 in our real lives, Black Mesa was meant to be shrouded in utter secrecy, meaning no one employee knew everything about what was going on, instead working on very specific tasks that would then be taken to other groups like an assembly line for discoveries that only a handful knew about. And due to the nature of these discoveries and research being made, efforts required a huge amount of people, each with a minuscule amount of knowledge as to what was going on. This meant that Black Mesa itself was home to countless scientists across many disciplines, and as research efforts grew, more and more housing units for employees employees' families even began to spring up, since those that worked at Black Mesa were not allowed to leave on account of the sensitivity of the things they were working on. Sadly though, as it always seems to happen with covert government operations, things eventually turned for the worst. During an event known as the Black Mesa Incident or Lambda Incident, a recently highly classified pure alien Zen crystal that was unearthed underground was inserted into the anti-mass spectrometer. This device was situated in Sector C's lab C33A, which was designed to analyze exotic and unknown materials led by Dr. Rosenberg. However, when this new Zen crystal was placed into the device, it triggered a rare quantum event known as a resonance cascade, which ruptured the space-time continuum and allowed extra-dimensional beings from a new realm to pour through. This eventually led to the United States government nuking the entire facility and killing all of those inside after special military forces were instructed to retreat, trying to keep the results of the experiment a secret from the public. Even more horrifying though, the resonance cascade itself attracted the attention of nearby alien forces in the galaxy known as the Combine, which then invaded Earth and enslaved its people. It's just yet another reminder of why humanity must always be careful with the power of things it doesn't understand, and also is a great setup for a video game in general. A big part of the reason why the Half-Life series has such an adoring fanbase. But despite how catastrophic this one test in Black Mesa was, it still only was one test. Because as we see at the start of the game, Black Mesa has a lot more going on than just the anti-mass spectrometer. Everywhere you go in the facility before all hell breaks loose are armed guards, retinal scanners, barred off doors, secret chambers, shady characters, and so much security that you can barely blink without suspicion being drawn. Clearly, there are all manner of different experiments and strange research going on in this concrete jungle in the desert. And when you take into account extremely weird figures like the G-Man, who are referenced as being in the Black Mesa facility before the resonance cascade, it's clear something very sinister is going on behind the walls of Black Mesa. So the question becomes then, what exactly is going on at this secret research facility? We know that alien communication and technological development would have been a big focus based on what we've seen, but presumably this would have carried over to other aspects of study as well, outside of physics, including genetics, physiology, neurology, and much more. Presumably, there should be countless research papers and discoveries inside Black Mesa that, if we were able to get to, would reveal so much about the human condition, space and time, and the meaning of life itself. And really, for me, just the idea of exploring this now fabled place we get to run around in game sounds so exciting. Getting to uncover more secrets about how the facility started, about what it's discovered, and what the real goals of the top brass in the United States government with Black Mesa are. If the rumors of Half-Life 3 being real have any truth to them, we might just get to find out here shortly. One of the best parts about video games is they allow our imaginations to really go wild with things that could otherwise not exist. And in terms of places like this, almost no games have something more fantastical and otherworldly than the polyhedron from Pathologic, a structure shrouded in so much mystery you could make a game on just the building itself. Situated on the far western side of town, the polyhedron is a massive structure that reaches into the sky in the shape of a tornado or wasp's nest. Its features and creation itself defy all gravity and known laws of physics, with simply a small point at the bottom with miles of roots beneath it holding up a contraption that rivals New York skyscrapers. Inside the cylindrical structure are plain walls that cover entire rooms, with strange markings, symbolism, and doors to nowhere everywhere. Many in the town see the building as a demonic presence of pure evil, while others are convinced that the structure could house the secrets to immortality and the soul. But regardless, the real intentions of this place are still shrouded in so much intrigue and mystery. Originally commissioned by the illustrious Kane family and designed by Peter Stamatin, the polyhedron was built 5 years before we even take the reins of the player character. The true intentions behind its creation are still completely unknown to the town residents, or even how it was built in the first place. But what we do know is that in the meantime, the location is being used as a housing unit of sorts for young children. Hundreds of innocent younglings live within the walls of this maze, but unlike the adults, the children are able to see through the walls into other dimensions entirely, giving them the power to live out their greatest dreams in a fantasy that never ends. Somehow, in the depths of the polyhedron, a sort of magic has been concocted that allows the human mind to be expanded, and even some adults that stay in the interior long enough report seeing visions of their childhood and feeling like a kid again, without a care in the world. However, what seems like a potentially ultra-realistic place on the surface may be hiding even more sinister and dark secrets. There have been reports of pools of blood that appear beneath the polyhedron late at night, along with screams of children that have gone missing. And when you consider just how creepy the actual man who built the polyhedron, Andrew Stomatin, is, you start to wonder whether or not the true purpose of this building could be something beyond evil. After all, why has this mysterious structure attracted so many children in the first place? And how on earth does such a thing even exist in our plane of existence? It defies all logic and reason, has no concrete explanation, and seems to inspire pure love or disdain depending on the person who sees it. And when you add on top of this the rumors that the labyrinth is a conduit of sorts for souls, which may hold the keys to immortality, it becomes clear that crazier things are occurring that almost no one knows anything about. In fact, even the original creators of the building have remarked how the land it was built on is sacred and should not have been disturbed for any reason, implying that there may be an amalgamation of scientific and spiritual forces at work in the inner depths of the tower. But overall for me, the polyhedron is just a puzzling and peculiar conundrum, and because there are so many kids at the heart of it, it could be one of the single most haunting mysteries in games, where potentially hundreds of children are being kidnapped, brainwashed, and tortured in order to extract their souls, all for some nefarious reason we never get to learn. It's a place that is as terrifying as it is intriguing due to how little we know about it, and it's a shame that the Pathologic series has never gotten the love it deserves, seeing as we may never get a third game that could potentially give us more answers to this grand mystery. Without a doubt, one of the most interesting places in video games I've ever seen. The Fallout series is not only one of the biggest franchises out there right now, but also one of the most mysterious. And while that mystery comes from all over the place, including the vaults and their heinous backstories, the questions of who really dropped the bombs and the theories around the war, to whether or not the teddy bears from Fallout 4 are actually watching us the entire time, out of every mystery in Fallout, one of the best is a specific place we get to visit in the third game, that not only has connections to many other Fallout titles, but also is home to some of the biggest secrets the series has to offer, the Dunwich Building. Located in the southwestern corner of the Fallout 3 map, west of the infamous Tenpenny Tower, the Dunwich Building at a glance is nothing special. It's your run-of-the-mill abandoned office building in the wasteland with shattered windows and a burned-out roofing unit. But the closer you look inside this disheveled structure, the crazier things get. On the first floor when you walk in, it becomes clear that the entire building has been decimated, and in the rubble now lies a host of feral ghouls that will attack you on sight, along with an assortment of different audio logs and journal entries that detail the life of different survivors that have tried to call this place home. The more you listen to these recordings though, the clearer it becomes that a lot more than meets the eye is happening in this building. Previous inhabitants like Jamie can be heard slowly descending into madness, whispering in tongues and seemingly giving themselves over to some sort of higher power, a power we have yet to see or hear about. And as you traverse this ruined building more and more, a broken set of passageways can be discovered that lead deeper beneath the building, full of more audio logs and environmental storytelling, which all culminates in one horrifying discovery. Deep underground beneath the Dunwich Building lies what is known as the Underchambers, a small chasm littered with feral ghouls, all surrounding an obelisk in the center, which sings a soothing hum while spewing out an unbelievable amount of toxic radiation. One of the ghouls in the middle is none other than Jamie, who you heard on those lost audio logs, and if provoked, he will start to somehow order the feral ghouls to attack, resulting in an all-out brawl and utter carnage. Somehow, the ghouls in this building were not only being controlled, but were apparently praying to this obelisk, gathered around it like monks when we first find them, and considering that feral ghouls are supposed to be mindless killing machines, this discovery is quite unique. However, even more horrifying, if you turn up your in-game ambient sound volume high enough, the echoes of an eerie voice can be heard, beckoning the player to surrender themselves to find salvation. Something obviously nefarious is going on in the Dunwich Building, but as to what that is, we still don't exactly know. If you search through the terminal entries in-game and across newer Fallout titles, it can be deduced that the Dunwich Building is actually an office of operations for a group known as the Dunwich Borers, a company that manufactures rock drills for large tunneling operations. In Fallout 4, we even get a glimpse into one of these massive operations firsthand, which includes strange hallucinations and voices very similar to the kind we encounter in the Dunwich Building as well. Theories on what is happening happening here range from demonic possession to top secret scientific research from before the Great War even began and the bombs fell. But the actual culprit is one that we can read about in now countless terminal entries regarding the Dunwich Boars, Ugeltoth. Regarded as some sort of mythological or supernatural entity, the Eldritch being was supposedly a force that was being studied even before the Great War between the United States and China in Fallout, and is said to have powers of mind control, time manipulation, and matter deconstruction. The Dunwich Boar Company from its onset was actually a front to study this creature further, and the obelisk we find underneath the office building is actually a discovery by the company which allowed them to sacrifice members to turn into feral ghouls even before the Great War had broken out. So the question then becomes, who exactly is Ugeltoth? Were feral ghouls a result of this being rather than the war as we previously assumed? And what even is the purpose of these ancient artifacts and creatures that the Dunwich Boars were studying? Potentially, something even more harrowing and disastrous than nuclear fallout in winter lurks beneath the shadows in Fallout, and the Dunwich building may be at the center of this mystery that seems to have been taking place now for millennia. Knowing Bethesda, it's a type of puzzle we may never get all the answers to, and as long as we don't, the Dunwich building and its company's foundations will forever be shrouded in secrecy. For any of you who have been watching my channel for a while, you know that Cyberpunk 2077 is my favorite game of all time. And while that mostly comes down to masterful writing and moments that really make you feel something, one of my least discussed parts of Cyberpunk that I love as well is the world building and lore. And in any universe where cybernetics and human augmentation have become so commonplace, there are bound to be a whole myriad of mysteries and secrets to uncover. But maybe the most fascinating of all of these is a place in the story that is completely shrouded in secrecy, that might just hold the keys to the most important revelations of all, the net. You see, in Cyberpunk, the net is somewhat analogous to the internet in our real lives, a vast telecommunications network that is even more extensive, reaching things such as cybernetic limbs and almost every application on Earth. The net itself is made up of an amalgamation of hard lines, radio links, cell networks, microwave transmitters, and any chip that can output a signal. Upon its original creation, the net was meant to be a decentralized and open breeding ground of ideas and cultures, where anyone could connect and instantly talk to others across the planet or share ideas. And in Cyberpunk, this sharing came not only in the form of computer monitors or interfaces, but also even cyber modems called cyberdecks that allow users to plug electrodes into their brain to interface to the net in a fully 3D environment, allowing traversal and sneaking around. With all of this power, many different large corporations and governments constructed data fortresses or custom code that allowed them to infiltrate other rivals' databanks, meaning this Wild West of the net's history was full of espionage and intrigue. But as these corrupt megacorporations continued their tirade into taking over the net, some prominent activists began to become more enraged. The entire point of this technology was the freedom it allowed, but with many military-grade artificial intelligences being constructed by every single notable faction, government, or company, things were starting to get out of hand, with too much power being focused in the hands of a few. In retaliation, one of the most talented hackers in cyberpunk history, known as Raish Bartmoss, unleashed an especially potent virus known as the Roving Autonomous Bartmoss Interface Drones, or Rabbits for short, which quickly spread across the entire open communication channel of the net, transforming any AI encountered into rogue killing machines. This event, known as the data crash, would forever transform the world of Cyberpunk and change the net into something almost unrecognizable. In no time, everything cascaded into utter chaos, with these rogue AIs turning against their masters and taking entire corporations down with them. Due to the sheer scale and power, even Netwatch, a worldwide policing organization for the net, was unable to stop them. And as a final contingency plan, they decided to create one final AI of their own, known as the Blackwall, which was tasked with containing all rogue AI to remote, inaccessible portions of the net. In time, the Blackwall proved to be extremely effective, and mutated the net itself into a much more closed-off ecosystem, with a massive red data layer that was used to trap these now sentient AI in their own corner of cyberspace. Corporations and governments began to spin up their own private networks everywhere, and what previously was a technology meant to unite us all now was nothing but a barren wasteland, with hackers and netrunners connecting to the open net periodically to get information or exchange secrets, while most traffic now took place in custom private networks. In Cyberpunk 2077, we even get to interact with both portions of this new and old net multiple times, with many rumors spreading that either aliens, artificial intelligence, or even human-lizard hybrids are behind the deepest parts of this digitized world, concocting plans to take over the world or change society as we know it altogether. And really, the net itself just lends itself to so many interesting and horrifying ideas like this, in many ways being an entire civilization of newborn consciousness that are trapped in a world of nothing but ones and zeros. And it raises so many questions, including what were Bartmoss's end goals before his death? What are the rogue AI behind the Black Wall hiding? And could there be secrets about the world's past and future hidden in the forgotten data layers? Or even, what are the mega corporations up to in their new highly secured private networks? It's a lot of questions that we may eventually get answers to in the Cyberpunk 2077 sequel coming years from now, and I can't wait to hear more. Because for me, the net and everything that surrounds it in the universe of Cyberpunk is so full of fascinating mysteries and secrets that you can't help but want to know more about. A place that by some definitions might not even truly exist per se, but the closer we look into it, might have a more dramatic effect on the real world than the real world itself, especially in a world where human augmentation and cybernetic connection to outside influences is more powerful than ever. Imagine the type of catastrophe that could be wrought should some of those rogue AIs gain control of systems that govern everyday humanity in this universe. A scary thought to think about, but also the exact kind of thought that makes mysterious places and games so special. But as always, thank you guys so much for taking the time to watch this video or any others I put so much time and effort into. Because I work a full-time job as well, I usually have to just spend excessive amounts of time on the weekend doing as much as I can week by week to try and get these long-form videos out. But I really do enjoy them, not only because it's the style of content I like to watch, but hopefully because also it's something you guys like as well. So once again, I really do appreciate all of the love and support, and let me know down below if there are any other mysteries or topics you guys really want to see me cover. I love hearing from all of you what you find interesting or fascinating, and even just topics that you think I would have an interesting perspective on or take. But as always, until next time.